Factoring GCFs. Factoring is basically the process of returning something to what it used to be before multiplication. Let's take the number 6. 6, we break that down into 2 times 3. These are primes right here. And this 2 times 3 tells us that 6 used to be 2 times 3. And so this is what it was before multiplication. Let's say an 8. Well, 8 is 2 times 4, and 4 is 2 times 2. So we got 2 times 2 times 2. So 8 used to be a 2 times 2 times 2. So factoring is returning something to what it was before multiplication. So just a reminder, to find the GCF, we're trying to find out what can these be divided by. So this is a review. 8 can be divided by 1. It can be divided by 2. It can be divided by 4. And it can be divided by 8. 4 can be divided by 1, by 2, and by 4. And the greatest common factor that they can both be divided by is 4. So the 4 is the greatest common factor. So what we're going to do is that we're going to rewrite the problem here, 8x plus 4. And we're going to take the greatest common factor, which is 4. We're going to put it on the outside. Sorry, we're going to put a parenthesis here. And we're going to multiply by the greatest common factor and divide by the greatest common factor. So let's divide both terms here. So we do both. Multiply. And the reason why we're both multiplying and dividing is that the multiplication and division of 4 is equivalent to using 1. And this means that we're not changing the original expression. All right, so this 4 right here remains outside. So 4, and then parentheses. 8x divided by 4 is 2x plus 4 divided by 4 is 1, and then close parentheses, and we're done. Okay, so next we have 8 and 6. The greatest common factor for 8 and 6, let's see, I can divide this by 1, I can divide this by 2, I can divide this by 4, and I can divide by 8. 6 I can divide by 1, I can divide by 2, I can divide by 3, I can divide by 6. The greatest common factor is 2. Both of these can be divided by 2. So 8x plus 6, and put this in parentheses, and the greatest common factor is 2, so we're multiplying by 2, and then we're dividing by 2. So what we get is 2, and parentheses here. 8x divided by 2 gives us 4x, plus 6 divided by 2 gives us 3. And this is what the expression was before multiplication. 2 multiplied with a 4x plus a 3. Okay, so for 8x and 8, or should I say 8 and 8, the greatest common factor for 8 and 8 is 8. So we're going to put the greatest common factor here. Again, the greatest common factor is going outside. This is the greatest common factor. This is the greatest common factor on the outside, the greatest common factor right there. Not only do you multiply by the greatest common factor, you divide also. So we end up with 8 parentheses. 8 divided by 8 is 1x, plus 8 divided by 8 is 1. Okay. And if there's a 1 in front of a variable, you can neglect to write it because the 1 is understood, so it's still there. We just call it understood 1. Okay, the greatest common factor for 8 and 10, both of these can be divided by 2. So 8x plus 10 will multiply by 2 and divide by 2. Okay. So again, 2 is your greatest common factor. So we end up with 2 parentheses. 8x divided by 2 is 4x, plus 10 divided by 2 is 5, and close parentheses. Okay, the greatest common factor when it comes to 8 and 12, you can divide these both by 4. So 8x plus 12, the greatest common factor is 4. So we multiply by 4 and we divide by 4. So again, greatest common factor here, which is 4. As a result, we'll get 4 parentheses. 8x divided by 4 gives us 2x. plus 12 divided by 4 gives us 3. Okay, the greatest common factor with a 8x and a 16, or 8 and a 16, will be, I can divide these both by 8. So my greatest common factor will be the number 8. So we're going to multiply by 8 and divide by 8. So we end up with 8 parentheses. 8 divided by 8 is 1x, plus 16 divided by 8 is 2. And so we have our parentheses and everything in place.